Hey there guys, how are you today, and welcome to my preview of the 2019 Formula 1 season. And this isn't going to be any preview, this is going to be combined with my I Asked Twitter series. So for this video, I asked out a series of questions on Twitter, and my video is all going to be based on the answers I received from you guys. 9 questions which are actually supplied to me by my Twitter followers, and let's get into it. So, question 1 was, who will win the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors? So, Crystal Racing says, this F1 in the 2000s, give him a follow on Twitter by the way, Vettel and Ferrari. So he thinks Vettel will win the Drivers' Championship and Ferrari going to win the Constructors. And I think a lot of people would like to see that, particularly Ferrari winning the Constructors. Of course, they have not done so since 2008. They have been close to Mercedes in the last couple of seasons, but they've always kind of seemed to peter out towards the end of the season. So we see, interesting to see if they're stronger this year. And then of course, in terms of Ferrari, will Leclerc be able to do better than Raikkonen did last season? It's a big ask. And win Ferrari Constructors' Championship alongside Sebastian Vettel. Robbie says that I would say that the Drivers' Champion might be Hamilton. Again, although I do think it will be close between all the main rivals, mainly Verstappen. So I think Robbie is predicting what we all want to see, a Hamilton versus Verstappen fight for the 2019 World Championship. Of course, we had in the media earlier this week, Christian Horner saying that Hamilton is actually afraid of Verstappen. I'm not so sure, but I think Verstappen is the strongest driver in the grid, apart from Hamilton. And I think it's going to be a pretty exciting season, that's for sure. So, Laurie is next, and he says Ferrari and Leclerc. Because in my opinion, Leclerc will become number 1, and is very good under pressure. So this is a different prediction. He agrees with F1 in the 2000s that Ferrari win the Constructors, but he reckons Leclerc is going to be beating Vettel this season. And I think that's an interesting prediction. You know what? I agree. Next up, we have Josh Stocks, who says Hamilton and Mercedes easily this year. Ferrari will crumble, and Honda won't be able to get Red Bull up there, and that Mercedes will walk it. And it's an interesting one. Of course, Verstappen's not going to be happy if he has an unreliable Red Bull again. But it's going to be interesting. It's not a very optimistic prediction, I have to say, Josh. I really hope you're wrong. Even though I'm a Hamilton fan, I want it to be an exciting season with Hamilton winning at the end. But what you say could happen, and that would be sad in a way. Next up, we have Nicole, who completely agrees with Josh and goes for Hamilton and Mercedes for an easy win. We next have Cavallino, who says Max Verstappen for the World Championship for the World Drivers and Mercedes-Benz for the Constructors. So that's going to be an interesting one. It's always interesting when you have a driver winning the championship who doesn't drive for the team who wins Constructors. So that could lead to a very interesting season. It would suggest that Red Bull have a strong car too. But I guess it maybe indicate that Bottas is maybe letting Mercedes down. I don't know if that's maybe a prediction there. I don't know what you think, but Gary Brown responded to that tweet saying that Honda are going to have to perform for that to happen. And of course, going into the season, that's going to be a big question. Have Red Bull made the right decision to ditch Renault engines and go to Honda for the season? It's going to be an interesting one, but Cavallino thinks that is the right decision. And F1 in the 2000s has kind of said an extra thing here, saying that he reckons Bottas will be dropped for Ocon mid-season. Maybe that will impact on Mercedes. And then Gasly has a nightmare worse than a certain Pokemon. Not really sure what we're talking about here, but that's all, because I have no idea what that means. I know what a Pokemon is, but oh well. And then Atish Ho, whatever that says, reckons Lewis Hamilton will win the Drivers and Mercedes will win the Constructors. And I think that's quite a solid prediction. Lots of people think that. And Brock Bolton agrees, saying Hamilton and Mercedes again. But this time it will be the greatest championship ever. And you know what, sir? If you're watching this, hopefully you are. I agree with you. I want that to happen. Hamilton to win it, but I want it to be such a close and great championship. That would be awesome. Kids Love F1 says drivers Lewis Hamilton and constructors Ferrari. So that would indicate that Hamilton's going to be outdriving his car, which is possible and quite normal in a way. And constructors Ferrari, which means Vettel and Leclerc will have a good working relationship and be able to get those points for the Italian team. Go Tab says Hamilton and Mercedes, but reckons Ferrari could be really close again. So that could be pretty interesting. Are they going to be close? I don't know. Tell me in the comments if you haven't been commenting on this tweet. Who do you think is going to win the drivers and constructors? But the final one here is Adri, who says Verstappen for the drivers and Ferrari for the constructors. Now that's an interesting prediction, because I think that is interesting. They've gone for a Red Bull and a Ferrari. We haven't had that combination here yet. So a completely different answer there. And that would mean probably a really poor season for Mercedes. So now it's time to go to question 2. An interesting one. Who will receive the most amount of Driver of the Day awards? So, and you can probably see where this is going. Cyprian Radu says, I'm sure Rob Kubica will get a few. Of course, he's returning to Formula 1 this year, but not enough to topple Max Verstappen. Then Peter says, that's obvious, as it's always Verstappen. And then Robbie says it will either be Raikkonen, Sainz, or Verstappen. But due to me thinking he'll produce some stunning race performances in 2019, I'll say Verstappen for now. Laurie goes for Leclerc, so not really getting onto the bandwagon of saying Verstappen's always going to be driver of the day. And then Josh Stock says Verstappen all day long. And Nicole says Verstappen. This guy always gets driver of the day. But what do you guys think of Max Verstappen? Is this a really important season for him? I think he needs to now be in the fight for the World Championship. This is where he has to really prove himself. And tell me, where do you think he really ranks amongst Hamilton, Vettel, Leclerc, Gasly, etc.? Next, we're going to go to question 3. Who will retire from the most Grand Prix? So, Peter says, it depends on how reliable Honda and Renault are, so not very probably, but no one will ever challenge the crash king of the late Andrea de Cesaris. So obviously that's an old driver who is known for crashing a lot. But it'll be interesting to see who retires most from the season. Robbie says either Kvyat or Stroll. Probably Kvyat more, because he will get worse reliability than teammate Albon will. Of course, Albon is new to Toro Rosso this season. It'll be interesting to see how he does. Good luck to him if you're watching. I mean, you're probably not, but you never know. It'd be cool if you were. And yeah, I would probably say Kvyat if I was answering this question. Laurie goes for Kvyat. Josh says Kvyat, then he'll be sacked. Nicole says Daniel Kvyat, the torpedo. And then Crystal Racing says Grosjean. And then, well, we're going to be hearing more of this probably. And then Mr. Siang says Ocon. Oh wait, seriously, I would like to say Albon, but I reckon he wants Ocon to be in Formula 1 this season, and to be honest, so do I. Now let's go to question 4. Who will be the best driver in the top 3 teams? Ignore my slight typo in that tweet, never mind. So Cyprian says at the moment Hamilton, but Leclerc will be close to him by mid-season. So I guess that indicates he thinks Hamilton will win the World Championship, but Leclerc could come on strong towards the end of the season. That could be interesting. And it maybe lead to a Hamilton versus Leclerc season in 2020, where maybe Hamilton could be in theory going for his 7th world title. We then have Robbie, who says, my best driver from the top 3 teams would be Hamilton, Leclerc, and Verstappen at least. Don't rule out Vettel and Ricciardo though. Renault could be a dark horse, so that's talking about Ricciardo, and Vettel will be just as quick as he was last season. But the issue with Vettel last season, he was quick, but he made a lot of mistakes, he crashed a lot, and had a pretty poor end to the season. Laurie says Leclerc. Josh Stock says best driver in the top 3 teams has to be Bottas. He takes his pitch roll like a man. So we're going to be hearing a lot more of this.
Valtteri, it's James. Valtteri, it's James. Valtteri, it's James. Valtteri, it's James. Valtteri, it's James.
Nicole says Hamilton, and then girl in the pit lane says Hamilton at Mercedes, Leclerc to surprise a Ferrari, and I'm going to throw a curveball in and say the Honda engine is going to knock Red Bull down and Renault will be the third best team. Now that's an interesting answer. And what do you other guys think? Do you think that Renault are going to be ahead of Red Bull this season, or do you think the Honda engine could take Red Bull to a world championship? Now, question 5. Who is the dark horse going into this season? So Josh Dock says Alfa Romeo. Yes, he knows that they changed the name for now. Of course, they're now Alfa Romeo Racing, I believe. Giovinazzi and Kimi Raikkonen will be strong, and so will the car. So let's see how the Iceman will do in that car. And then Nicole says in terms of driver, he would say either Ricciardo or Raikkonen. As for team, he would say either Renault or Alfa Romeo. For Cyprian Radu, he says Ricciardo and Hulkenberg for the odd win, and Kimi, Giovinazzi or Checo, so Perez for the odd podium. That's an interesting prediction and could indicate an exciting season. Robbie says that he mentioned this in a previous question. I know you didn't, mate, but don't worry. I reckon it would be Renault and Ricciardo, although I have Raikkonen and Alfa Romeo on my mind, as that might be possible. Blake417 says, hey man, Williams have had a decent power unit since the start of the turbo hybrid era, but been let down on the chassis and era in the last few years. Two good drivers, of course, George Russell and Robert Kubica, and and obviously Russell proved its class last year in Formula 2 and the year before, but we have to obviously see how Kubica goes. But it could be really interesting. And by the way, how do you think Robert Kubica is going to do in 2019? I hope he does well, but I'm not so sure. Laurie says Alfa Romeo Racing, or maybe even Haas, because I reckon Haas is going to be a bit better than what people expect. But he also says he's biased because Haas is his favourite team. And actually, mate, I really don't like Haas. I don't know why. I was never really grown to like them, and I don't particularly support them. And then Go in the pit lane says, I'm going for Kimi Raikkonen on pole in Australia. Now that would be so cool. Ignore the pun there, the Iceman thing. That wasn't intentional. Question 6. Will Gasly fit into Ricciardo's shoes? So of course, Daniel Ricciardo has moved from Red Bull to Renault. That was announced in the summer. And Pierre Gasly has been promoted from Toro Rosso to Red Bull. So Cyprian Radu says, dunno really. He was never Mr. Consistency last year with only some eye-catching results. Hopefully he gives Verstappen a run for his money. It would be cool to see Verstappen and Gasly battle it out. Robbie says, Gasly might impress and get some good results, a few podiums perhaps, but I'm worried how he'll be treated by the team with Verstappen being their number one driver. Blake says, think Gasly has proven that he's good enough to be in the top team, but Max Verstappen is going to push as number one. Pierre will do well if he qualifies / finishes above Max a few times this year, or even grabs a podium. Laurie says he will have a good season and won't be that far off Verstappen in terms of pace. Josh says, yes, he'll give Max a run for his money. I feel he is though underestimated as a driver. Nicole says, no, so completely contrast there. He is going to get royally screwed and be Verstappen's ringman. F1 in the 2000s says no, and Warren says, unfortunately, yes, but this is an interesting one. Yes, he will probably be even more obviously treated as a second driver. Probably won't get the opportunistic wins Ricciardo took though. So I think apart from one or two answers here, the general consensus is that Gasly will do fairly well, but not well enough to challenge Verstappen, and you'd assume they're not well enough to win the 2019 World Championship. Now, question 7. P4 to P10 in the Constructors' Championship will be. So Robbie says 4th Renault, 5th Alfa Romeo, 6th Haas, 7th Williams, optimistic, 8th McLaren, 9 Racing Points, that's basically former Force India team, 10th Toro Rosso. Cyprian Radu says Red Bull Racing in 4th, so that would suggest Renault are going to have a really good season. Alfa Romeo in 5th, Haas in 6th, pointing at other races, so Racing Point in 7th, McLaren 8th, Williams 9th, and Scuderia Toro Rosso in 10th. Blake says 4th Renault, 5th Haas, 6th McLaren, 7th Williams, optimistic again, 8th Racing Point, 9th Alpha, and 10th Toro Rosso. So he's not very optimistic about Alfa Romeo's chances, to be honest. Who's this? Lorry. 4th Renault, 5th Alfa Romeo Racing, 6th Haas, 7th Daddy's Disgrace, so that's Racing Point with Lance Stroll there. I suppose that's what he's talking about there. 8th Toro Rosso, 9th Williams, and 10th McLaren. So a poor season there for Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris. So how do you think Lando Norris is going to do in his rookie season in Formula 1? So Josh says 4th Red Bull, 5th Sauber Romeo, 6th Haas, 7th Daddy Racing, so it's Racing Point again, 8th Toro Rosso, 9th McLaren, and 10th Williams. Nicole says 4th Renault, 5th Alfa Romeo, 6th Haas, McLaren 7th, Toro Rosso 8th, Racing Point 9th, so a poor season for them there, and Williams in 10th. F1 in the 2000s says Red Bull 4th, Renault 5th, Racing Point 6th, Williams 7th, Haas 8th, Toro Rosso 9th, McLaren 10th, which means that Alfa Romeo are going to be in the top 3, and now that's a very interesting prediction. Canem says 4th Renault, 5th Alfa Romeo, 6th McLaren, Toro Rosso 7th, Racing Point 8th, Haas 9th, and Williams 10th. Mia says Alfa Romeo, Renault, Toro Rosso, Racing Point, McLaren, Williams, and Haas. Wheel to Wheel says Racing Point in 4th, Red Bull only in 5th. Now that's an interesting prediction. McLaren in 6th, Haas in 7th, Alfa Romeo 8th, Toro Rosso 9th, and Williams in 10th. So who would you guys is going to be think P4 to P10 in the constructors? If you haven't answered here, tell me in the comments down below. Next up, we're going to go to question 8. How will the torpedo Daniel Kvyat do? So, Robbie says, I'm not sure. Hopefully he doesn't torpedo everywhere, but we can't assume that's going to happen right now. We can't assume, sorry, that's going to happen right now. That would be being mean to an F1 driver, but I reckon it will happen right now, even if that is being mean to an F1 driver. Nicole says, terrible. Cyprian Radu says, we'll have the battle of Albon, but I'll say the car/team won't challenge for more than P8 in the constructors. Blake is being nice and pessimistic, hopefully so shit that he's gone before the French Grand Prix in the summer. Laurie says, I want him to have a good season because I don't like to see rejects in Formula 1. However, I can't see him having a good season, sadly. I think it's incredibly unfair for Hartley to get dropped for Kvyat, as I think Hartley would have done well in the Toro Rosso in 2019. Josh says, shite. Won't last the season again. F1 in 2000 says he'll do well and Red Bull will surprise us by replacing Gasly with Kvyat after the summer break. That's an optimistic prediction if you're a Kvyat fan. F1 Zone says decent enough flash your speed. Once Albon settles in, he'll look less impressive. Now finally we're going to go to question 9, a couple of questions here. Is Ricciardo going to get a podium with Renault, and is Leclerc going to outperform Sebastian Vettel? So Laurie says, almost. I think Ricciardo might just miss out, and yes, he thinks Leclerc will beat Sebastian Vettel. Nicole says, Ricciardo may get a podium, but he doesn't think Leclerc will outperform Vettel. Josh says yes and yes. Shadow Slasher says yes to both. Renault have improved year on year. I expect them to do the same again, and I expect Vettel to be outperformed by Leclerc, because it's a similar situation to Vettel versus Ricciardo in 2014, and Shadow rates Leclerc very highly. And this was what was coming into my head, actually, because of course Ricciardo basically destroyed Vettel in 2014. Is it going to happen again with Leclerc and Vettel? Going to be interesting, because of course Vettel's been pretty comfortable with Raikkonen as his teammate for the last few seasons, but I reckon that could be changing very soon. Robbie says, both possibilities are likely, especially since the Renault might be good enough to get Hülkenberg and Ricciardo a podium or two in 2019, and of course Hülkenberg hasn't had an F1 podium yet. So will Hülkenberg be on the podium in 2019? What do you guys think? And then F1 in 2000 says, yes, Ricciardo will get a podium with Renault, but no, Vettel will be on top of Leclerc. And then Kids Laugh F1 says yes for Ricardo, I assume, and no for the clerk. So guys, that's it. That was all the questions. 9 questions I asked. Thanks for the ideas for the questions. If you think of any more, a few questions about the 2019 season, and there is loads to talk about, like how will McLaren do, what's going to happen with Norris, what will happen with Williams. There's lots of things to talk about still. If there is, I'm happy to make another one release in a couple of weeks maybe. I'd like to know what you guys think, and I want to know, are you excited for the car launches? But also thank you for the support in terms of answering the questions. And if you're still watching the video right now, thank you for watching the video. And I'll see you guys next time for another episode of I Asked Twitter.